Now here's your host for Forum 50, Television 50's Community Relations Director, Linda Johnson.
Good afternoon and welcome to Forum 50. Today we're going to be dealing with an idea. The idea is technocracy. It had its inception in 1919 in New York City when industrial engineer Howard Scott drew together a group of scientists, engineers, and economists who later became known as the Technical Alliance of North America. This Technical Alliance researched and studied how to apply the achievements of science to social and industrial affairs with the aim of providing a better standard of living in continental North America with the least possible waste of non-renewable resources. The Alliance incorporated in 1933 as a nonprofit, non-political, non-sectarian membership organization. Today there are units and members of Technocracy in most states and in most provinces in Canada. It is supported entirely by dues and donation of the members. And today I have with me Mr. Reo McCaslin, who's the director of Technocracy Incorporated. He's located in San Francisco, and Mr. John Taube of Rohnert Park. Technocracy, by its very name, is frightening to a lot of people because I think a lot of people today feel that some of the problems we're having, rightly or wrongly, is because we don't understand technocracy, and we feel like the technical aspect has gotten out of control, whether through pollution or use of technology and doing away with jobs for people. Just describe why technocracy would be good for us, if you can.
Well, I'm going to start it off by asking a question. Then I'll answer your question.
Okay.
What has happened to our economy? Here, the United States, one of the greatest nations in the world, or the greatest nation in the world, finds itself in trouble and having difficulty solving the problems that are confronting us. Technocracy was born out of curiosity. Mm-hmm. Several men after World War I decided that they would look into what technology was doing as far as our social structure was concerned. They had noted that many thousands of the boys were taken out of the industrial processes, sent to war, but at the same time we were able to produce not only for the war, but for ourselves without them. And they wondered how far this would go. And that's how it got started. Now the question is, why are we facing a problem? Technocracy has asked that, and people have asked us why we are facing a problem. And the reason why we're facing a problem is because we have not adjusted to the change that technology has brought as far as our economic and social order is concerned. For the first time in the history of man, the citizens of the North American continent find themselves in a position where they can produce just about as much of anything that they care to due to technology. But somehow it has created a problem. Now, when the Great Depression hit us in 1930, it was a result that we had reached that point where we had too much of everything for the system to handle. I was in the milk business at that time, and I can remember we sold milk for 5 cents a quart. Peas from the farm were 5 and 2 cents a pound. Nobody was making money. Then Roosevelt stepped in, and lo and behold, how did he solve the problem? By destroying the farm products, pouring milk down to the sewer, shooting the hogs and cattle to get back to a sufficient scarcity so that we could start to rebuild again. Now, our process has become so adequate as far as our ability to produce that it doesn't take long for us to catch up and once again get in the same situation of having too much.
Okay, now so what technocracy is saying then, are you going to affect the change in production, or what are you going to affect it? What would technocracy change for us today? If the principles of technocracy could be applied to the northern continent now, how would we be affected? Would you change the way we distribute? Would you change our social order? Would you change the price and money system? What would you do?
Well, we certainly would have to change the system. There's no question about that, because the rules of the game as it is played today were valid 150 years ago. But since the advent of technology, they're not valid today. That's why we're having our trouble. You take money, for instance, and when we mention money, of course, that hits everybody. Yeah. But money actually is not fulfilling its role. In other words, we have the technicians, we have the engineers, we know what we have to do and want to do, but it's always a question of who's going to pay and can we raise the money. And right now, of course, we're going to cut down in our national program. We're going to cut down on the amount of money that's going to be allotted to the people that are poor, the people that are sick, the people that need that, but it's too expensive. We say we've got to balance the budget. But we have all of the material things that we actually need. It's finding a way to organize our technology for the benefit of people.
Okay, we are going to have to stop for a pause, but when we get back, I would like to talk to you a little bit more about organizing, because that seems to be where every system has broken down. There's been a lot of systems proposed over the years, and I don't know if you like to be lumped in, but there's been socialism and communism and groups that say let's start over and change the base that we're talking about, whether incentives to people or whatever, but they all seem to eventually have to revert back to compensating people. There seems to be a level that people, you can all start out on one level, but there's always some that move up and some that move down, and there has to be some sort of compensation. It seems like the human animal loves compensation of some sort, and that seems to be where the money aspect comes in.
Well, money has represented to him, to man, of course, the ability to get the things that he needed in order to live.
Right.
And naturally, it's a great concern to him that he gets his allotted share or as much as he can out of the thing. But where you have reached the point where you can produce a high standard of living for everyone, why money doesn't enter into the picture. Now let's check back just a little bit. In the old days, back a few thousand years, we used to exchange things on a barter system. Then when manufacturing picked up and there were more goods available, bartering system became cumbersome when it didn't work. So somebody introduced money. Now money has been very efficient up until the present time. But once again, our manufacturing and our ability to produce has risen to the extent where money now is getting in the way, just the same as the barter system did. And if we're going to measure the goods and produce them and distribute them, we have to have an accounting system based upon the energy that it took to produce them.
Okay,
That's
now on that note, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about energy certificates, because that's what you propose, right? Welcome back to discussion of technocracy. And Reo, before we left, we were talking at the time about possibly money, pricing has outlived its usefulness in today's society. And technocracy has an interesting concept that could go one step beyond, and that would be the idea of energy certificates for individuals. Can you explain a little bit what that would be?
Well, energy, of course, is the basis of all movement that takes place in a physical world. Nothing would move. There would be no activity whatsoever if it wasn't for the energy. We ourselves are energy-consuming devices. We take on food, and as a result, we have energy. If we stop eating, we soon lose our energy. Now, energy being basic, then, the actual physical cost of the production of goods is the amount of energy that it takes to produce it from the raw material to the used form. And so technocracy suggests that we set up what we call a functional type of social operation, a functional type. Now, you have it today, but it isn't paramount. We're not quite aware of it. I can give you an example. The telephone company is a functional operation. You pick up your phone, you dial a certain number, and you get results. Now, we may not know how it works or just what takes place, but it does work. That's the thing. And it works because the right people are on the job. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. And so we talk about a functional government. There's about, say arbitrarily, around 70 functions that are necessary for a high-energy civilization such as we have. I'll name a few to give you an idea of what I mean. There's education, communication, transportation, and so on down the line. These functional capacity. Now, from within each one of those functions, those that are in the function itself will select somebody to represent them at the top, so that you'll have about 70 men or women at the top of a control board because of their functional capabilities only, not because they're good politicians or anything at all. It's because they are functionally capable. They've been selected by their own kind. They'll select somebody to act as chairman of the board or director of the of the group. So no matter what problem comes up, in the functional aspect, there's somebody there that has the answer, that knows what to do about it, because they're all tops in their particular profession.
So in essence, are you saying let's do away with a certain level of management, the middle class management, or because right now, you know, when you talk about the phone company, okay, beyond the people who keep the phones running, the repairmen and the women who down everything, there is a level of management up there, the supervisors.
Superstructure.
All right, are you saying that in the energy certificates and technology, there be no need for that upper level?
Well, you see, now you're talking about the superstructure. That's the financial end of it. You see.
Yeah.
Now, whenever you weigh anything as to what you can do without and what you have to have, you simply eliminate in your mind one or the other to see what happens. Now, if you eliminate the financial structure and you keep the technicians on the job, let me give you an illustration about that. Now, Mrs. McCaslin and myself, when we go on these trips and tours to talk, we often fly. Now, when we buy our ticket, we don't ask who the co-pilot is or who the pilot is. We don't care. It's a functional thing, and we know that whoever is at the throttle of that particular airplane knows what they're doing, otherwise they wouldn't be there.
Would you have felt that way in that Air Florida plane recently when those two men made the decision to take off?
That was an accident. That was an accident. Something happened there. All right. But now supposing the passengers gathered together to elect somebody to fly that plane, would you get on it?
No.
No.
Good point. We'll be back in a moment. I find this a fascinating conversation because I'm sure it's one that brings out what you are, two gentlemen who are sitting here, and you really feel self-assured with technology. And I'm probably one of the generation that is not that sure about technology. So I poses all these questions in my mind. I'm not sure I trust equipment or machines. I still feel like I'm going to trust human beings a little bit more.
Well, just check yourself for a minute and see how often every single day you rely on technology.
Yeah.
Think about this morning when you got up, how cold it was outside, and think how you just turned that thermostat and you got warm. Think about how much wood you had to chop.
Yeah.
And then when your stove, when you turned it on, more wood. And then you use the toaster or the hair dryer, your telephone. You rely so much on technology. People don't realize that.
It is kind of a whipping boy, though.
Well, they've made it a whipping boy, but it's the greatest thing that has ever happened to mankind. It can take him out of that condition of servitude. It can take him out of the condition of poverty for the first time in human history. But it has to be organized for that purpose. Now, you asked a question about an energy certificate. The energy certificate will take the place of money. It looks something like a traveler's check. It's identifiable to the individual only. And it has, instead of dollars, it has energy units, the number of energy units available, so that when you pick up something, they will deduct the amount of energy that it took to produce that from the raw material to be used for them. Now, how will people get their energy certificates? Not like they do today, working. They'll get it because of their citizenship, because they're doing so little and they'll do less. I just read an article the other day about, I believe it was the automobile industry. We're talking about, in order to compete with Japan, they're going to have to put in more robots. But they said when they do put in more robots, they'll only need a fraction of the workers that they have at the present time.
And that always leads to then what happens to these, what's going to happen in the transition period between what we know of as using the phrases jobs and workers, and that phrase that will no longer be applicable in technocracy. What happens to these people now? And I've always heard, and I've been here for the last 20 years hearing that we're going to have more leisure time and more time to do the things we want. But that doesn't, now we see people that are retired saying they want to get back and work. They want to do things. They don't want to be put aside somewhere. And you and your technocracy, you're talking about at 45, you're over the hill and out of the game.
You know why?
Why?
Because they've never learned how to live. All they did was to prepare to make a living. And when they're taken out of it, they don't know anything else. That's why they want to go back. But there are latent possibilities and potentialities in all of us that have never been developed. And when you have the time to develop them, it'll be a new change, a change of life altogether. But it's the only way out, because what we have now at the present time is disintegrating. And we're going to have to go in some direction, and that's the only way we can go. Because we find in the study of nature that everything is unidirectional and irreversible. You've got to go ahead. You can't go back. Now we're trying to go back.
To the good old days.
Now, you can start an oak tree out of an acorn, but you can't get the oak tree to go back into the acorn.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Now, Technocracy, as of right now, is talking about mainly the continental part of of North America. You're not even talking about a worldwide situation. How, or I'd say Canada and United States becomes more of a technocracy. How does that interplay? Because today we're hearing how dependent we are for oil on the Mideast and places like. How will we work our energy certificates and people that are still living in the situation of prices and how will that interact?
Let me pick up that oil, just the oil and energy.
Okay.
We had a flood recently. The bridge was closed. There is no exact figure of the amount of people who couldn't get to work. Now these people who couldn't get to work went into the thousands, but no production was lost because all these people, the majority of people, are in what we call money transfer and paper shuffling. They're not in producing anything. So if you get this picture and the amount of people who are engaged in this and merely have them stay home, you're not dependent upon energy no more from the Mideast. And this is the design of technocracy, is efficiency. Now, let me bring in one point.
Sure.
The Roanoke Park, the city manager, about a year ago stated that 1/3 of the people in Roanoke Park go down to Marin County to work. Well, figure that out. They go about, round trip, about 70, 80 miles a day. Now, this is not a pleasure trip. It's not a pleasure trip. It's just a question of poor organization. Look at all that energy that they're burning, you see, and not enjoying themselves. And so with the design of technocracy is to see that these things don't occur. And then you could solve your energy problem.
People are fiercely independent. I would think what you're talking about, and one question comes to my mind is what about energy certificates for the people that are paper shufflers? How do they get their energy certificate? I mean, we're still going to have I assume the same population. The population is not going to quit growing because of technocracy. We've already got a large population, and already a lot of them are presumed individuals that are not productive in society. So how does the technocracy society provide for those individuals that are not producing and are not burning energy?
It provides for everyone regardless of what their status is. In other words, if there's no jobs for them, why should they suffer? You see, and that's what you have today. The minute one is out of work or unemployed, he's put in a position where he is faced with suffering, lack of ability to do things, and so forth, because he has lost his employment. But it wasn't his fault, you see. We've got to think in this way. Instead of a competitive system, one of cooperation, all working together for the same end product, the same desires that all of us have, the production of a high standard of living for everyone. That's all of our desires. And for the first time, you'll think of it differently. Now, we don't think of anything about the air we breathe because it's abundant. There's a lot of it. But believe me, if it was in short supply, it would be the main topic of conversation.
Right.
You see? Now, when these things become available, they'll take their place just like air does. You not think of them anymore, unless they get polluted.
Which we've done.
But you'll not think of it anymore. And it'll straighten out. But that may be desirable. But the point that I want to put over is this, that your present system is disintegrating, and it's going to get worse. And it's going to reach a point where something will have to take its place if we're going to survive. Now, we technocrats have no axe to grind. We're offering this program.
Is an informational option.
Right.
Okay, well, on that cheerful note about disintegration, we're going to take another break, and then we're going to be back, and when we do, we're going to give you a place where you can talk to these individuals more. Thank you for being with us on Forum 50 today, and we've been visiting about I think, a fascinating subject, technocracy, because whether I understand it or not, technology is here, and it's provided us with probably one of the best standards of living anywhere. And some of us have been kicking and screaming into the idea. But these two gentlemen have been with an organization that has been saying since 1919 it's the wave of the future. And I would like now, we do have an address and a phone number if you are interested, that you can contact Mr. Reo McCaslin in San Francisco, or you can call Mr. John Taube in Rohnert Park. And these 707-795-8442 in Rohnert Park, and it's 3243 Balboa Street, San Francisco. And if you really want an interesting conversation and throw up options, believe me, all the ones you can throw up, they've got answers for.
Well, if those that are interested will get in touch with us, we'll send them the printed material on the subject. It will give them much better understanding than we could possibly do in the short time we have here.
Now, just very quickly, because we do have to, we're not talking about an overthrow. You're not talking about political thing. What you're saying is it's going to have to come to the people, and they're going to have to say themselves, you know, that we tried other options, and it's going to have to be this one. Is that what you're saying?
Something new is going to have to come forward. May I add one other thought, Linda,
sure,
with the address, that we do have speakers available for engagements to give talks in any universities, service clubs, or any organization, and there's no fee involved. And if they either call the phone number that you gave, or they'll write to the address, that we can make arrangements for the speaker.
And I think it's very interesting. I think it's a fascinating concept, and I think it's certainly as viable as anything that has been put out politically in the last few years. So I just... The technical aspect has gotten out of control, whether through pollution or use of technology and doing away with jobs for people. Just describe why technocracy would be good for us, if you can.
Well, I'm going to start it off by asking a question. Then I'll answer your question.
Okay.
What has happened to our economy? Here, the United States, one of the greatest nations in the world, or the greatest nation in the world, finds itself in trouble and having difficulty solving the problems that are confronting us. Technocracy was born out of curiosity. Several men after World War
Now here's your host for Forum 50, Television 50's Community Relations Director, Linda Johnson.
Good afternoon and welcome to Forum 50. Today we're going to be dealing with an idea. The idea is technocracy. It had its inception in 1919 in New York City when industrial engineer Howard Scott drew together a group of scientists, engineers, and economists who later became known as the Technical Alliance of North America. This technical alliance researched and studied how to apply the achievements of science to social and industrial affairs with the aim of providing a better standard
as far as our economic and social order is concerned. For the first time in the history of man, the citizens of the North American continent find themselves in a position where they can produce just about as much of anything that they care to due to technology. But somehow it has created a problem. Now, when the Great Depression hit us in 1930, it was a result that we had reached that point where we had too much of everything for the system to handle. I was in the milk business at that time, and I can remember we sold milk for 5 cents a quart. Peas from the farm were 5 and 2 cents a pound. Nobody was making money.
Standard of living in continental North America with the least possible waste of non-renewable resources. The Alliance incorporated in 1933 as a nonprofit, non-political, non-sectarian membership organization. Today there are units and members of Technocracy in most states and in most provinces in Canada. It is supported entirely by dues and donation of the members. And today I have with me Mr. Reo McCaslin, who's the director of Technocracy Incorporated, he's located in San Francisco, and Mr. John Taube of Rohnert Park. Technocracy, by its very name, is frightening to a lot of people because I think a lot of people today feel that some of the problems we're having, rightly or wrongly, is because we don't understand technocracy and we feel like...
One, decided that they would look into what technology was doing as far as our social structure was concerned. They had noted that many thousands of the boys were taken out of the industrial processes, sent to war, but at the same time we were able to produce not only for the war, but for ourselves without them. And they wondered how far this would go. And that's how it got started. Now the question is, why are we facing a problem? Technocracy has asked that, and people have asked us why we are facing a problem. And the reason why we're facing a problem is because we have not adjusted to the change that technology has brought.